Hello, today I am going to be reviewing the major label debut album by Lana Del Rey. This album is titled Born to Die and it was released on January 27th, 2012. This is the album that, of course, introduced the world to Lana, although she had been releasing tons of stuff before that, sometimes as Lizzie Grant, which is her real name, Elizabeth Grant, and then, of course, as her stage name, Lana Del Rey, which she sort of started to adopt later on, closer to when this album was released. This is how I got introduced to her music as well. I was a day one fan, you could consider me. I remember I discovered her in December of 2011 when the Born to Die music video had come out. Video Games was sort of the song that catapulted not only this album cycle, but also her career in general. The song was just sort of released on the internet without much fanfare, and she definitely did not expect it to be anything of consequence. I mean, it's a ballad, it's a slow-burning kind of song. It's not the kind of song you launch an album with, and it's certainly not the kind of song that usually launches a mainstream artist's career. And yes, I would consider Lana Del Rey a mainstream artist, even though she still never had quite that appeal in the pop culture. I think that, she's talked about kind of rejecting the indie label and sort of feeling as though she belonged more in the sort of idea of like either her being her own thing and not just being an indie artist, but also being something that's a little bit more than what she would consider an indie artist. And I can sort of understand where she's coming from with that. Video Games basically went viral online, and it's amalgamation of these very kind of dramatic, what she calls Hollywood sadcore, which is an inscription she uses for her music, which I think fits perfectly to this sort of laconic, melancholic, overdramatic sort of delivery of her very low register vocals over a very sort of whimsical and descriptive autobiographical sort of account of a romance that is dark and deep and twisted and full of abuse and neglect and drugs and alcohol. This is something that pervades all of the themes of her music, especially on this album. This is her most overdramatic album, and it definitely paints the most imagery because the soundscape is a lot bolder and it's not as jazz influenced, it's not as indie or alternative rock influenced as like Ultraviolence is, or as Honeymoon is, or as singer-songwriter influenced as Lust for Life is. This album is trying to be a little bit more pop, but it's also embracing hip-hop, trip-hop, what is considered Baroque pop, which is something that Lady Gaga has experimented with, which is this very sort of avant-garde but distinct pop sound. And she definitely blends it together to create a very cohesive album, which is Born to Die. Video Games actually feels a little bit like an outlier song in the rest of the scope of this album because it's one of the few not upbeat songs on this record. Even some of the songs that don't necessarily have a pounding beat or rhythm to them, like Million Dollar Man, they're not necessarily ballads, to be concise. They're very much more broad than that. So Born to Die is a very interesting album. It feels very multidimensional. I have heard critics say that some of it just feels kind of like inauthentic, like she didn't actually live these experiences. This is all fake, or this is all a persona. Lizzie Grant is a much more introverted person than some of her songs may imply, or she's not necessarily dated nearly as much as her songs may have implied. A lot of these things may not have actually happened to her, but they're inspired by stories, novels, films. They're inspired by, her friends, her life, observing life. And I don't see how they're not inauthentic because, I mean, let's be real. We all can relate to some aspect of a lot of these very Greek tragedy-like drama relationships that she portrays in a lot of these songs. The first song on this album, Born to Die, when I heard that title, I was instantly intrigued, not only in the song, but in Lana as a person, because I was like, she's choosing to name an album Born to Die. That's a very powerful statement. That is probably one of the most pessimistic yet true statements that anyone could ever state about our existence on this earth. It is true. It's 100% true that we are born to die. That is, a given fact, that if one is born, one will also die. And the way she states this in this very sort of in-your-face, but also kind of elegant way, feels very poetic, and I just found it to be this very sort of magnetic sort of pull to the theme of this album. Born to Die kind of does set the palette for the rest of the album. You hear the same similar kind of production carried through a lot of the other songs. I had never heard production like this before. It always alluded to sort of a bit of a Western feel because you have that, if you know what I'm talking about, in the background, and it sort of accents and is used on I think 9 or 10 of the songs on this album, and I don't mind it because it's a cohesive binder that glues the whole thing together and makes it feel cohesive. Born to Die is very operatic and yet overdramatic. I mean, people criticized her vocals. She had a very lackluster vocal performance on Saturday Night Live exactly 6 years ago in January of 2012, which has gone down as some of the worst performance live that's ever been given. But you know what? She lived up to it really well. She moved on. She got better. She definitely has vocals. If anyone wants to dispute that, I mean, she has a very low register. She sings some very low notes on especially Born to Die. And it does feel a bit like garish and a little bit off-putting at first. Because some of these soulful crooners that do get that low don't necessarily make music like this. But she definitely bridges this sort of really deep, crooning, soulful sound with also having this hushed, refined falsetto, which she does employ more in her later music, but it definitely does come through on this album as well. She just has a very unmistakable and interesting voice. Off to the Races is a song that goes in so many different directions. It's if Born to Die was a slow burner that's just sort of setting this mood and atmosphere, it's kind of depressing and melancholic but interesting. Off to the Races wants to be more high octane, but it also wants to be a little bit more in your face, and it wants to be a little bit more gaudy and lavish. The way she accents her voice with these sort of almost like pinup girl sort of oohs and ahs, and then this like very cocky delivery that she has feels almost a little forced and disingenuous to her character that she presented on Born to Die, which is so much more sort of centered and, you know, a little bit more quiet and introspective. Off to the Races is her experimenting with being a more of an extroverted character, of being this character of Lana Del Rey, who lives for, you know, these fancy horse races and like full of, you know, wealthy people around her and money and jewelry and makeup and scandal and affairs and all of this debauchery. But it has underneath it an orchestral backbone that makes it cinematic. It makes it epic. And that's what redeems this song for me. It definitely does have some like lyrics that are like very, you know, tragic and sad. My old man is a bad man, but I can't deny the way he holds my hand. And he grabs me, he has me by his heart. He doesn't mind I have a Las Vegas past. He doesn't mind I have an LA crass about me. He loves me with every beat of his cocaine heart. This is a relationship that shouldn't continue, but it will because Lana doesn't care. She is living for thrill. She's living for cheap lust and love. And this is something that definitely feels, again, like something that she's not necessarily thinking in her head is truly her, but this is a, you know, a testament to young love and to a specific generation of Hollywood starlets, and especially the 50s and 60s, who, you know, chased the fame the way they did and lived the way they did. A generation of women who worked the system. They stuck with men who didn't treat them right, but they ended up becoming so much more powerful because they twisted those men. And, you know, she definitely, I mean, again, you could argue that these aren't feminist lyrics because she's staying with abusive men who are on drugs and aren't doing anything good for her or not good influences. But there's a little bit of this, again, sarcasm, this wittiness, this I know what I'm doing and I'm stronger because of it, that shows that these women actually were playing the system. I don't know. She's trying to push that off, and I don't find it to be like that, like eye rolling. I don't mind it. If anything, it's just very sardonic and fun. You know, when she sings "Swimming Pool, Glimmering, Darling, White Bikini Off with my red nail polish," she's sort of just slurring together all these words, and she does that a lot on a lot of songs. Like "National Anthem" is a perfect example. And it's just this rush, and it sort of does feel like a cocaine rush. You know, it's meant to feel ecstatic and kind of out of control. But like I said, that cinematic background that breaks down towards the end of the song and you just hear the orchestra, you hear the strings play out, you realize that under the surface there's something really powerful going on. There's a thread throughout this album that will make this Greek tragedy of an album that you can't turn your eyes away from, or certainly can't turn your ears away from. So Blue Jeans is sort of the first song that really had that hook and melody that drawed me into Lana Del Rey's songwriting style. She knows how to create hooks that are melodramatic with some interesting key changes and some very drawn out vocals that feel very smooth, and they're just mesmerizing. And I find Blue Jeans to be the first. It starts out with a trip hop, hip hop inspired background and production, and then soars into this I will love you till the end of time. The production swells, it becomes this bigger than life sort of ballad like song, even though it's not a ballad, it's sort of in between. The music video is black and white, alluding to film noir and this sort of elegance to it that is just in this pool and like the riches and the palm trees. This is what Lana Del Rey is about. It's buttery, it's silky, and it's dark and it's brooding. And it's all of these things that shouldn't go together that do, and I find it just so interesting. Video games, I talked about it. This is a song that doesn't sound like anything else on the album, but like I said, it does have that piano, that like kind of laconic delivery that just feels so earnest and so sincere. And it is autobiographically telling a story of a love that definitely could fall apart. He's just playing video games. He's not paying attention to me. But why do I stay with him? It's you. It's all for you. Everything I do, I tell me all the time, heaven is a place on earth where you tell me all the things you want to do. I know that you like the bad girls, honey. Is that true? I'm a bit of a bad girl, and I can't deny that. I can't just blame myself for falling for you over and over again. I'm taking the power and control back. I'm going to admit that I am a sucker for this. And our broken, weird relationship at least is living. It's life, and I'm going to draw experiences from it, and I'm going to learn a lot from this. I don't know, that's just how I'm taking a lot of this, because this is not the kind of love and life that I pretend to live or would ever live and would ever sing her out of if I was a songwriter. But I do understand and appreciate that Lana is trying to bridge all these different ideas of what love could be and tell all these interesting stories. Diet Mountain Dew is very interesting. Again, a hip hop inspired beat, and she's sort of just half singing, half talking. Some people have described it as very chatty. She does get a little chatty in some of the delivery of these songs. She has this almost off-key delivery that's not always on the note it's supposed to be. It's just like kind of just moving with the vibe of it. So that's why it's almost rapping, but it's also singing. And she's singing about, Diet Mountain Dew, which is this like soda. I find it such an interesting song title. You're no good for me, but I want you, I want you. Diet Mountain Dew, baby, New York City. What do those two things have to do with each other? I don't really know. Never was there ever a girl so pretty. Do you think we'll be in love forever? I could see it as maybe like one of them is Diet Mountain Dew and the other is New York City. One of them is something that's kind of domestic and, thrifty. Like, it's just sort of simplistic, and the other is glamour and fast-paced and scary and encompassing. And they're this sort of dynamic duo that has met. I don't know, this is me pulling at strings here. Let's take Jesus off the dashboard. He's got enough on his mind. That line is one of the cleverest and smartest on this album, because I think that's such an important lyric. Let's not pretend that we're, doing this for good reasons. We're beyond that sort of notion of right and wrong in terms of religion, and Jesus can't judge us because Jesus has a lot more important stuff to do. Like, really? Like, come on. Like, they make a big deal about us being in a relationship when we've got murderers on the loose, and we've got wars going on, inequality. National Anthem. The song that had that iconic music video, which was a tribute to Jackie Kennedy Onassis, where Lana dons that iconic coat and that iconic hairstyle in the music video, and she actually recreates the assassination, which I remember I showed that music video to my mother, who was actually watched that live footage, and I remember she thought that was too much. And I have remembered some people talking about her, the way she got it to the point where she was crawling over the car to be a little disconcerting and a little bit inappropriate. I can somewhat understand what they mean by that in terms of capitalizing on such a horrific event, even though the people who have passed on, who have witnessed it, it's something that you really shouldn't put into a pop song and mimic so soon like that. And I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think that she is embodying the sort of tragedy and drama of the young and wild and sort of short-lived life that you could argue was the Kennedys' relationship or the Kennedy presidency, which a lot of people posthumously have made out to be this sort of iconic thing in itself of, what America is. but also teen romance and how it could end in a car crash, how it could end in overdose. These things are really tragic and horrible, but there's something that she's sort of celebrating about how these people lived so unafraid of death and how that could be somewhat intrinsically American. I see a lot of people talk about the American value is to live fast and live young. And to attribute these things is to like part of American values. Whether this is right or wrong, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that I can see how over the time, and especially in the last century, these values have become ingrained in us. That yes, we do need to live for the moment, which is important, but we also tend to celebrate people who take so many risks and who tend to live bigger than their years and then often ending up in tragedy. I'm your national anthem, red, white, blue in the sky, summer's in the air, baby heaven's in your eyes. These are the only lyrics that actually make any sense. The rest of the song is this chatty sort of string of debauchery that doesn't really make a lot of sense in my understanding. She's basically singing about the money elite, the people who had so much money that they didn't know what to do with it. Fast cars. She mentions the Queen of Saigon, which is a reference from the Vietnam War. One critic from Digital Spy called it demonic Stepford Mall. I thought that was such an interesting, it's sort of like the Stepford Wives, but getting all dark and moody and angsty. But it is about this relationship that is just so almost religiously kind of crazy and all over the top. But it's also super sad and tragic, and it again has that cinematic orchestral backing that ties it all together, that gives it that cinematic experience. And she does strip that down in the music video, and it is some of the most haunting instrumental string arrangements that I have heard Lana use, or I have heard in a lot of pop music to begin with. Some people criticize it for sounding a little too similar to Born to Die because of the beat-driven chorus that is implemented. I think it sounds very different. I don't have a problem with it. Also, the music video featured A$AP Rocky, who plays John F. Kennedy, which is interesting, as she chose a black man to portray him, which I thought was very clever and sort of flipped the script sort of way to symbolize what this song was about and what the music video is supposed to be about. Dark Paradise is a song that feels like it should be more than it is. I don't necessarily see it as sweeping or, enthralling in melody as some of the other songs that encompass it on this album. I appreciate it for being another one that's trying to be so grandiose and melancholic and sweeping, but I just find the chorus to be a little bit lacking. Maybe it just doesn't do enough for me vocally. Every time I close my eyes, it's like a dark paradise. No one compares to you. I'm scared that you won't be waiting on the other side. Again, another unapologetic love song for a possibly, again, some sort of devil-may-care character who is so bad that it's good. This song has been categorized as gothic rock. I don't necessarily see that, but I can see that dark undertone brooding underneath it to, characterize that sound. And I could say that, although I don't necessarily, even though Rick Knowles does like to put a little bit of that rock sound into her music, I don't necessarily think of this song as a rock song. It was a single, but it wasn't a charting single. I think it was only released in in Europe. Radio is another one that I think should have been bigger than it was. This song, unlike Dark Paradise, feels like a beautiful sort of sweeping anthemic radio hit. She's singing about basically how she finally proved all of them wrong. She finally got a hit on the radio, and she moved to LA and she made a name for herself after all those people, told her that she never would. I'm sure she had so many people tell her that her music was never going to go anywhere. And to the point where she truly believed that. And I don't blame her. I mean, it's so hard when you have a niche that is kind of more indie based to possibly hope to break into the mainstream. It's a tall order. Do you like me now? She sings haughtily and sort of, no one can stop me now, I'm on top. Their heavy words can't bring me down, but I've been raised from the dead. She sings this so slowly and deliberately and powerfully, and that's where some of the true magic of her vocal delivery comes through. Her voice sort of glides over these notes, and it feels so dramatic. You're like, oh my God, this is heavy. But you can sense that because this is a heavy topic. Pick me up and take me like a vitamin. Not a vitamin, a vitamin. Because my body's sweet like sugar venom. Sugar venom. She has a way with words, I will say that. Carmen is like a story. It's like a novel. It's singing about a figure or a 17-year-old girl on Coney Island in New York. And this song is very inspired by the sort of Lolita culture and the Lolita ideology. She references a streetcar named Desire. by Tennessee Williams in this song. So she's paying homage to a lot of different, Carmen is another tragic love story by Prosper Mérimée. Carmen, staying up till morning, only 17, but she walks the streets so mean. It's alarming, truly, how disarming you can be. Eating soft ice cream, Coney Island queen. She admits, Lana, that she used to struggle a lot with drugs and alcohol, and so she's kind of putting herself into this character when she was younger. She says, "You don't want to be like me, looking for fun, getting high for free. I'm dying, I'm dying. You don't want to get this way, street walk at night and a star by day. It's tiring. Girl, I can understand that." The boys, the girls, they all like Carmen. She gives the butterflies, bats her cartoon eyes. She laughs like God, her mind's like a diamond. That one lyric is the most Tumblr lyric, but I do really love it. It's so bigger than the rest of the song in some ways. It's reaching for a metaphor that is so over the top that you really do think about it for a while. There's this sort of tragic romantic notion of, these pinup girls and prostitutes, how they have no choice but to do the things they do, and they don't like it. But it's like this weird, twisted, dark thing that just can't be stopped. I get that sense of this. I mean, it's a very dark song, and it's very, spaced out and sparse in production to serve more room for the actual lyrics and for the heaviness of it. She sings a little bit in French at one point. I mean, this is a song where you can't sing this without wanting to have a cigar in your mouth or like smoking, because it just sounds like someone who's a heavy smoker singing this in a dimly lit kind of cabaret, French bar, like being super, it's that kind of mood and setting. Baby's all dressed up with nowhere to go. That's the little story of the girl, Basically, a lot of girls live this. This is not something to hide from. This is a reality that we need to accept. This is the life of so many people, especially in the bigger cities, relying on the kindness of strangers, tying cherry knots, smiling, doing party favors. Which an ode to how this is just a universal thing that all women have to deal with to some extent. They're viewed as being these objects, and that then makes them seem like they're just these things for pleasure or for doing silly little frivolous things like making party favors. Put your red dress on, put your lipstick on, sing your song, now the camera's on. So put on this performance because that's what you're here to do. Well, that's not, as she undertones in this song, what women are really here for. And that's something that she's trying to slowly, like just by presenting it in this way, sort of flip the script and subvert the narrative. And so this song is subversive, even though it might seem like it's just paying homage to something that is all too common, a very tragic sort of morality tale of feminism. And she's basically asserting that, well, these women have no choice. They need to be uplifted, and they need to be, men need to do better in terms of not choosing to end in this sort of position in the first place. It's a very complex sort of story that doesn't necessarily want to have an ending. It's just stating how things are and how things may just continue to be. And that's just how nature is. It's not necessarily right or wrong. It's blurring the lines between that sort of moral compass. She does that on a lot of songs. Million Dollar Man employs that sparsed out Western instrumental to the highest extent, and I love it for it. It's one of my favorite songs on this album. Again, it's a little bit like Blue Jeans, but it's this man is breaking her heart, and she doesn't understand because he looks like he would be everything for her. But you're really just dirt cheap. You look like $1 million man, but why are you breaking my heart? Why is my heart broke? Because of you. You have all this money, but is that all I really want from you? Sort of like this realization, and it's this sweeping sort of sound once again. Summertime Sadness was a huge hit from this album, mostly due to a Cedric Gervais remix that I never actually listened to. I don't really like when these songs get remixed. I think Summertime Sadness, the original version, which has this beautiful music video, very iconic, just her and sort of looking very lustful and mournful and almost suicidal. Because this song is about that. This song is about that, like, love in a time when you would think everything is happy and bright in the summer. Well, I've got that summertime sadness. It's actually, introverts can sometimes feel more introverted in the summertime because they see everyone else out happy and in a relationship, and they're just like looking at their own life and they feel more lonely than ever. I can certainly relate to that. She references the Bruce Springsteen song, Dancing in the Dark in the Pale Moonlight. It contrasts, something so beautiful like this fairy tale romance that we had. Got my red dress on, I'm swinging with you in the night. but it realizes how it all broke down and how somber things actually did get. Kiss me hard before you go, summertime sadness. I just wanted you to know that, baby, you're the best. Like video games, she's painting this very somber and depressing picture of a romance that, for better or for worse, is the way it is. And it's too good that it's bad. You know, it's this like tragic relationship that she has. And being with this person, it has its highs, but it has its horrific lows. And that's the side effects of his love. And so she's dealing with that and understanding that this love may even kill her. The things he's making her do, the drugs, the fame, the money, the driving so fast on the highway, the understanding and losing of sense of self. Is this really what she wants? And she is sort of not really inwardly second guessing, but you can sense that there is some inward reflection in this song and others like Video Games or $1 Million Man, where she is sort of realizing that this is not what I actually need to survive. And, you know, it is over the top as well. If I go, baby, I'll die happy tonight. It's something that doesn't necessarily sound like she really is going to die or that she knows she wants to. It's just this sort of notion of things are so insane right now. I don't know what's going to happen. I might go. But you know what? I have to just surrender to the craziness that is this love and this romance. It's damaged, but it's also like at the same time just like accepting. It's hard to describe, and these songs are very interesting. I'd be very interested to know what you have to say in the comments. This Is What Makes Us Girls is the closing track on the standard edition. I think the lyrics outweigh the music, the sonic aspects of this song. It's definitely autobiographical. It's singing about her when she was 16, 17, with her girls and, you know, walking the streets and being a little bit more devil may care and a little bit more debaucherous. And the sort of just stark reality of that. It's cheeky too. I mean, she's poking fun at herself, you know, something that's very relatable to a lot of people, especially, you know, someone who grew up in a more urban environment. This sort of culture, street culture, and sort of this sort of obsession with love having a price, love not being something that's actually so magical, but something that's a little bit more insidious and dark and twisted, because the ideas of love do get twisted when you bring in prostitution, when you bring in all of these things that do kind of conflate a more Puritan kind of understanding of what love and romance should be. And again, it's not objectively stating this is bad or this is good. It's just stating it. This is what makes us girls. We all look for heaven and we put love first. Don't cry about it. And it is a feminist song as well, because it is also saying that girls, we need to stick together and don't, you know, let these men actually end up controlling us. We need to have control here, and we can't cry about this. We can't, you know, let this get us down. We're stronger together as one. And that's how we're going to overcome these situations that we're put in. You know, when Lana was young, she was shipped off to a boarding school in Connecticut because in Lake Placid, New York, where she grew up, she got into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol. And this is sort of that, her friends that she made and lost because she was then on the train and had to get shipped away. That's this like tragic moment in her life. And it was sort of this wake up call to realize that we have to stick together. You know, these friendships were, through the good and the bad, what really made me who I am. And yeah, the drugs and alcohol are horrible things that can destroy us, but we can rise above and not let these things actually get the better of us. Don't cry about them. It's all going to happen. Just accept and move on. That was so eye-opening for her as a young child, as a teenager, to be separated from her friends because things just got too crazy. But those memories she'll always cherish, and now she's acknowledging it's a curse. But we can break this. You know, we put other men in front of other, you know, our girlfriends, and that's not right. We need to lift each other up. We can't let men break our friendships, and also drugs and alcohol. I also have 3 bonus tracks on this album. We have Without You. I think Without You is such a strong song. It has a similar sort of sound to some of the other songs on the album in terms of its sweeping chorus. It has that one lyric that I think is so iconic of hers. I think I found God in the flashbulbs of the pretty cameras. I remember that was her Twitter bio for a while, and I thought that was just like the wittiest lyric. And it's sort of like that Marilyn Monroe, you know, tragedy of like, I looked for God in all the wrong places, but I ultimately came to realize that I'm nothing without you. Your love is deadly. Tell me life is beautiful. They all think I have it all, but I'm really nothing without you. So, you know, what you see in the pretty pictures is false, and all of this money and notoriety can't buy me the love I really wish I had for you. We also have Lolita. This is more of a just in your face sort of description of the Lolita aesthetic that she is embodying in a lot of these songs. It's a lot more industrial. Meet me in the PARK. Let's get dark tonight. You know, that sort of aspect. It's like very seedy and murky in its theme and subject matter. And then we close with Lucky Ones, which is another song that's a highlight that definitely closes out the album really well, singing about let's get out of this town, it's all falling apart, I want to just drive away with you, I want to elope. This sort of more kind of like fairy tale happy ending could possibly happen for us. Every now and then the stars align, boy and girl meet by the great design. Could it be that you and me are the lucky ones? You know, every now and then there are those happy meetings and encounters that grow into something so beautiful and perfect and destined, and his destiny is fulfilled. And it's interesting to hear her be so poetic about destiny when so much of this album is too realistic. It's too dark and like everything will fall apart and there's always tragedy to love. But this is showing, and maybe it's not always a sad ending. Maybe there is a way out of this darkness and this depression that I can tell she has in the lazy, sort of downtrodden delivery of a lot of these songs. Altogether, these are songs from someone who is broken, but who is also still at the same time so much a diehard romantic. They do not want to give up on the idea of love. They believe that that conquers everything. And so Born to Die for me symbolizes this ideology of like, yes, we are all born to die, but that space between is where we search for that love, and that is the most important thing. And the only way that we can make death truly beautiful is if we've loved in between so strongly that it eclipses our death. That's sort of how I view her sort of way of using that as the album title and the theme and the subject matter. Everything is on extremes on this album. She gets a little bit more nuanced and refined on later records, but this is definitely her most, you know, statement type record that she's created. I think it was a good start. I mean, some people have said that the production needed a lot of work. I could understand that. It does get a bit repetitive. It's her first album, but it's not at the same time. She's been doing songs for so long. And I do think that as a debut, it definitely has some of the most pop radio friendly songs on the album, on any of her albums. And that is something that she sort of veers away from on later works, which is a good thing, I think, because I don't want to necessarily see her turn into like someone who just makes pop dance songs. Like that's not where she's meant to go in her career. She's meant to make really introspective indie songs. And so the fact that her career has gone the way it has, I think is kind of refreshing to realize. Anyway, I'd be interested to know what you thought. I mean, again, it's really interesting to interpret all of these songs and understand where she was coming from with them. I hope you enjoyed this review. I have reviewed almost all of her other albums now. I've reviewed Honeymoon, Lust for Life, and Ultraviolence, and I will link those three in the description box, the reviews that I've made for them. And I do plan on reviewing her Paradise EP. That's the last thing of hers I have yet to review. So I hope you enjoyed these reviews, and I plan on doing the Paradise one in the near future. So thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Kiss me hard.